Hi girls! A big hello to everyone. My name is Vlada, and I know that our social media feeds are just overflowing with images of so-called successes. And I also understand how all of this can be demotivating, especially when a client leaves you and you realize that you made a mistake at work or something just isn't working out. You want to create beautiful striking curls and do your job well, but damn, something just keeps going wrong. Or maybe you can't seem to attract clients. And then you go on social media and see that all the other artists are super successful. They've made a million here, a million there, and their work is just absolutely perfect. So in this video, I want to share with you my own awkward and unsuccessful stories with clients' times when my work didn't turn out well, when I had to refund money because I didn't do a good job. Of course, it was incredibly embarrassing for me to remember these stories. Moreover, I even found my correspondence with one client where we discussed, well, my unsuccessful work. I refunded her money and I reread all of it. And honestly, it was just pure shame and cringe. I really felt it all over again. So let's go back to the year 2020. I'm a student studying in college. At that time, I decided that I really wanted to be independent and get a taste of adult life. I wanted to work, but I didn't want to take the kinds of jobs that most of my peers chose to combine with their studies. Mostly, those were positions like waiter or sales assistant. I wanted something different, with a flexible schedule and the opportunity to earn more. And, as you might guess, I chose the beauty industry, specifically working as a lash lamination specialist. My desire was just incredible. I wanted to do lashes for everyone for free. I was even ready to pay people, as long as I could practice, do lashes, and have at least some content. Fueled by this enthusiasm, I started developing myself as a lash artist. But the problem was that I still hadn't bought a treatment bed yet. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe it was just that I didn't have the money for it. Although now I realize that you can buy a treatment bed for even 2 or 3,000. That's better than nothing, and definitely better than the conditions I had. So, in my apartment, I had a single bed that no one slept on. It was just sitting there unused. So, I decided to turn that bed into my treatment table. And then the next problem was that the room I worked in was quite small. Even here, let's take a look. My treatment bed is set up. How is the technician supposed to sit properly? Here's the client's head, here are the client's feet, and here's the technician. So the client's head is right here. Well, I think everyone understands that, right? And you work comfortably. You can see one eye, you can see the other eye. I couldn't sit like that in my room because it was too small. Basically, the bed fit exactly in the room, and there just wasn't enough space for me to come up, sit down like that, and work with clients. So I sat to the side, and so I ended up sitting like this. The client's head was here, and while I could at least somewhat see what was happening with the right eye, I couldn't understand at all what was going on with the left eye, especially in the root area. And you know very well that during the application we need to see the root area very clearly. I had no idea what was going on there at all. I was just somehow brushing those lashes onto the pad just so they would be there, just so there would be a pad. Back then I didn't even know about parallel placement or the even application of the products. But, just so you know, at that point I had already completed basic training. I understood how the correct posture for a technician should look, but I just made do however I could, working with the conditions I had. On top of that, our bed was also very low, much lower than a regular treatment couch, right? And that also made working uncomfortable, but nothing could stop me. So basically, I invited models who would come to me for free, and in return, they would post my ad and tag me in their stories. And a girl came to me who had already had a lash lift done before, and as she told me, she used to get a very beautiful dramatic effect, but I couldn't achieve anything at all. She had lashes that grew straight. They weren't anything complicated, just regular straight growing lashes, but I simply made a number of mistakes. Plus, it didn't help that I was just uncomfortable working. I couldn't even see half of her lashes, and she didn't get any curl at all. So the only effect she got was a slight tint. But you understand that when lashes grow straight, even if you tint them, it doesn't really help, because you can't see them at all, they need to be lifted. I felt so awkward when this girl walked up to the mirror, looked at herself, and was clearly a bit puzzled. What exactly happened here? And of course, I kept working for a long time after that. I mean, I sat there for 2 hours trying to do something with her lashes, but there was no effect at all. And she comes up and says, "Are they really supposed to look like this? Because last time the effect was so strong, they were practically reaching my eyebrows." Of course, it wasn't supposed to be like that. Those were just my mistakes. I was so embarrassed back then. Well, at least she was my client for free, yeah. At least I didn't take any money from her for that kind of work, or rather for the complete lack of work, of results. Nevertheless, this girl posted a story. We kind of had an agreement, or so I thought. Of course, no one came to me from her tech, no one followed me. If you're interested, I can make a separate video about which mistakes prevent you from getting the desired effect. Now, after all these years, I obviously understand perfectly well which mistakes lead to that. But at that time, when I was a beginner, I was just building my client base and gaining experience. That was my mistake. And honestly, my number one fear overall. Let me know in the comments if you want a video like that, a breakdown of mistakes and why you might not get the desired effect during lash lamination. For the second story, I even grabbed my phone on purpose, because I want to read you some excerpts from my conversation with a client. Of course, I won't show the entire conversation, because that's not really fair to the client, but I will show you some photos and parts of our chat. So at that point, I was already an experienced technician, and mistakes in my work were happening less and less often. In other words, I had already built up a client base and gained a certain level of experience, and you could say that at that time I was more often producing successful work than the opposite. However, I still had some gaps in my knowledge when it came to working with difficult lashes or challenging cases. And I still remember, every time I had a client with unusual, let's say, lashes, not just the regular easy ones, but ones with real challenges, it made me a bit panicky, because I couldn't always predict exactly what the result would be. So let's go back to the beginning of the story. It's March. A girl messages me saying she wants to book a lash lamination appointment, and she tells me that she's already had her lashes laminated by another technician. I'm reading her message verbatim. "I went for a lash lamination yesterday, but she must have done something wrong and nothing curled. How soon can I do it again? I guess I need to wait a bit, right?" I replied that lash lamination can be redone right away, and I asked her to send me a photo of her lashes. But the client disappeared for a while, got distracted by other things, and basically vanished. After some time, she messaged me again, now wanting to book a lash lamination appointment. By then, her lashes had already grown out. So enough time had passed since that previous lamination, and so the girl books an appointment with me. When she comes in for the procedure, I always start by analyzing the client while they're sitting, of course. I look at her lashes and realize, oh boy, something's definitely going to happen here, because first of all, her lashes were short. Working with short lashes is generally a bit more difficult than working with long or medium length lashes. In fact, medium length lashes are the easiest to work with. Extra long and extra short lashes always make our job more complicated. Moreover, her eyelashes were incredibly dense and remarkably glossy, not porous at all. In fact, they exhibited very low porosity, which is a desirable characteristic. I realized this when I started laying the lashes onto the rod. I tried to do it, but the lashes kept coming off. I would stick the lashes to the rod again, and they would come off again. They would just spring off like that. Basically, under no circumstances did they want to stick to the rod. As for the direction of lash growth, hers grew perfectly straight. I tried at least somehow to stick the lashes to the rod, to lift them up in any way I could. But since at that time I still didn't have enough experience or the necessary skills to work with lashes that just spring off the rod and are so thick and stiff, I couldn't achieve an even curl. So yes, the lashes were lifted. But what was, let's say, the main mistake here? The lashes were lifted, but you could say it was like a checkerboard pattern. In other words, some lashes were lifted, some were not, some were lifted, some were not. And after the first procedure, the client didn't really say anything to me, but a month and a half later, when she was booking her next appointment, she wrote me the following. Vladislava, hello. I'm scheduled with you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I'm a bit concerned. Last time, a lot of lashes were left uncurled, and they weren't short. Could you curl all of them this time, even the shortest ones? Otherwise, the effect only lasts for about a week to a week and a half. Of course, when I received this message, I became alert and was prepared to give my absolute best during the repeat procedure to try to lift those lashes and, most importantly, to create an even curl. The day of the appointment arrives. The client comes in for the procedure and we carry it out. I remember that even then she seemed a bit confused and uncertain when she looked in the mirror. But overall, she didn't spend a long time examining her lashes in my office. She just paid and left. Sometime later, on the same day, the client sends me a message. Now that I've looked more closely, it seems like they're starting to straighten out, and I noticed a lot of lashes that aren't curled. Some of them have a curl, and some have straightened out. It's weird. The same thing happened last time. Meaning, the last time this client came to me for the procedure, I'm thinking maybe just wash it off and redo it, since it hasn't been 24 hours yet. I asked her to send me a photo, which I'll attach for you. And here you can really see that some lashes have curled normally quite strongly. Some of the lashes are just sticking straight out, and it looks really strange. On one eye the curl is much stronger, and on the other it's less pronounced. And honestly, looking back from today, I just feel a bit sorry for the girl who kept going to different technicians and no one could lift her lashes. I hope that after all these years she finally found the right technician for her. I no longer work in that city now. I moved and now work in another one. But I hope that girl found a technician who can handle her difficult lashes. For me personally, this whole story ended with me looking at the photo and realizing that, indeed, the work was poorly done and the result was incomplete. Some of the lashes curled, while others did not. And I simply decided to refund this girl her payment. Back then, I didn't even offer her, "Oh, come to me again, let me try one more time." Simply because I understood that I wouldn't be able to work with those lashes, I just couldn't lift them. Let me remind you that at that time, I wasn't exactly a beginner. I was more of an average, mid-level technician, whose work was more often good than bad. But these particular lashes just turned out to be too difficult for me. Let's go over how one should have worked with those lashes. Look, our main difficulty is that it's impossible to stick the lashes to the rod. So, what can we do first? We can use the thickest glue possible, and it definitely shouldn't be a gel glue, but rather the usual liquid kind. Now look here, on the left I have a recently opened new glue, and there's quite a lot of it. And usually this kind of glue is still a bit too runny, and then gradually, as it comes into contact with air, the glue thickens. And here I have a glue that has almost completely run out. You see, at the very bottom I specifically keep this glue separate for working with lashes like these. With these kinds of lashes, it's simply impossible from the very beginning to create a perfect, proper layout that will give us a uniform curl in one plane that will result in every lash being curled. Here it's just impossible to stick the lashes to the rod. So what's the solution? Before applying the first solution, at the very start, we attach the lashes to the rod as best as we can. It's perfectly okay if there are some small, minor air pockets, or if the overall layout appears a bit uneven in certain places. And now comes the truly ingenious and very useful life hack. After applying the initial solution, the individual lashes become significantly more pliable and much easier to manage, allowing us to precisely arrange them exactly the way we need them to be. We can then begin the process of carefully correcting our entire layout and systematically start to eliminate all of the remaining air pockets. We start removing all the crossovers between the lashes. In other words, we bring the layout, well, not to perfection, but to a solid B or B+ level. Recently, I also had a client with lashes like these that just wouldn't stick to the rod at all. And I took a photo at the stage of laying them out. And now take a look. One section of the layout is before correction, so to speak, before fixing. So this is the layout that I managed to do, at least somehow. There was simply no other way. The lashes kept coming off. And on the other side, I have the layout that I already fixed, and look how neat and pretty it is there. And as a result, we achieved a uniform outcome on one plane. There were no missed lashes that didn't stick to the rod, popped off somewhere during the process, and ended up uncurled. We curled every single lash together. Of course, when it comes to working with difficult lashes, there are still many rules and life hacks for handling and taming any type of lash. I cover all of this in my online lash lamination course. But even this particular life hack that I have just shared with you is generally more than enough to effectively work with very stiff, stubborn lashes that simply won't stick to the rod no matter what you try. I am quite sure that someone is about to comment like, "Oh my god, how can you even possibly touch these delicate lashes with tweezers or an applicator after the first solution has been applied?" Every single training session and manual explicitly states that it is absolutely forbidden. Friends, I agree with you when it comes to regular lashes, your standard client work. You shouldn't touch them after the first solution. You really can damage the lashes. But when we're talking about very dense coarse lashes with low porosity, friends, these lashes are so thick and tough that we'd actually have to try pretty hard to damage them mechanically. So nothing bad will happen if we use this method. But the client will leave us with an even, vibrant, beautiful curl, and we won't have those situations I told you about earlier. Thank you for watching this video until the end. It was incredibly awkward for me to remember all this, to read through the messages, and oh my god, to look at those photos of terrible work. But I hope that my stories will help you not to worry or overthink things when something doesn't work out, because that's absolutely normal. And every top master is the ones you watch and think, wow, they're so cool, their work is perfect. Even that person made a ton of mistakes in the very beginning. Even that person had clients who were dissatisfied. We are all human, and we all make mistakes. Especially when you're just learning something new, making mistakes is completely normal. So, friends, don't get upset, I believe in you. I'm proud of you. And every mistake only brings you closer to your goal. Bye bye everyone. See you in the next video. See you soon.